For more than 5 decades, Tom Selleck has been more than just a Hollywood icon. He is the embodiment of quiet strength, integrity, and timeless charm. With unforgettable roles in Magnum P.I. and Blue Bloods, he has not only earned admiration but also amassed an impressive fortune, now estimated at around $45 million. At the height of Magnum P.I., Tom earned $500,000 per episode, the equivalent of $1.2 million today. Later, as Frank Reagan on Blue Bloods, he continued to receive $200,000 per episode, totaling almost $5 million per season. Along with income from syndicating hit shows and a portfolio of valuable real estate, including a 65-acre ranch in Hidden Valley once owned by Dean Martin, Tom Selleck has established a solid financial foundation. However, this extraordinary fortune is closely tied to very personal choices, from sacrifices for the land he loves to decisions that brought tears to his family's eyes. What was it about Tom Selleck that so deeply touched his loved ones? Stay tuned to discover the story behind his legacy. Before fame, before fortune, before the world knew him as the mustachioed icon of American television, Tom Selleck was just a quiet boy in a working-class home, raised with values that money could never buy. His family wasn't wealthy. Her father, a disciplined man with a quiet fire in his eyes, worked tirelessly in real estate, not in pursuit of luxury, but to provide stability. Her mother chose a different career. She stayed home, raising her 4 children with great devotion and gentle hands. In their modest home, there were no extravagant vacations, no luxury cars, no silver spoons. But there was something more, something far more valuable. There was love. There was discipline. And there was an unspoken understanding that character would always matter more than comfort. When Tom was still a young boy, the family moved west to Sherman Oaks, California. They didn't move closer to Hollywood. They moved closer to hope. Surrounded by sun-drenched sidewalks and quiet neighborhoods, Tom grew up in the shadows of Los Angeles, never seduced by its bright lights. He was lanky, soft-spoken, and more comfortable listening than leading. But even then, there was a presence about him, a stillness, a sense of something deeper waiting to be awakened. He spent his early days chasing basketballs, not dreams of stardom. Sport became his first language, based on repetition, endurance, and rhythm. And through those long training sessions and early morning drills, Tom not only grew strong, but also patient. He cultivated humility. He laid the foundation for the man he would become. His teachers took notice of his manners. Coaches noticed his work ethic. But Tom never considered himself special. He was just trying to do things right. When he earned a scholarship to the University of Southern California, it wasn't because he was flashy. It was because he was consistent. He went into business administration, not acting. The Hollywood dream didn't appeal to him. Not yet. But life, as it often does, had a different plan. There is something profoundly beautiful about those early years. No scandals, no shortcuts, just a boy raised on hard work and quiet hope who would one day bear the weight of fame with the same grace with which he once carried his father's lessons. He didn't know it then, but those quiet values learned in a humble home would later become his greatest wealth. Tom Selleck never planned to be an actor. He didn't stand in front of the mirror practicing lines. He didn't chase auditions. He didn't even dream of Hollywood. His world was one of basketball courts, business books, and stable expectations. He was headed for a life of quiet stability until fate whispered otherwise. It happened during his senior year at the University of Southern California. He had earned his place there through sheer determination, playing college basketball with the same quiet intensity that defined him. He was studying business administration, thinking about the real estate sector, perhaps following in his father's footsteps. But then something unexpected happened, something small but monumental. A drama teacher noticed him. An invitation, a drama class, a leap into the unknown. At first, it felt like a detour, but the stage did something to Tom. It didn't inflate his ego. It opened his heart. The discipline he once poured into jumps and sprints began to flow into lines, monologues, and emotions. He discovered something that had been dormant within him all along. A love for storytelling, a way to connect without raising his voice, a way to be seen, not just heard. At first, it wasn't glamorous at all. There were no big auditions or major breakthroughs. But Tom, being Tom, didn't chase the dream recklessly. He studied. He trained at the Beverly Hills Playhouse, honing his instincts and respecting the craft. He wasn't there to be famous. He was there to be good. Then the world changed again. The Vietnam War intensified, and a draft notice came. Tom didn't resist. He didn't run away. In 1967, he enlisted in the California Army National Guard and served in the 160th Infantry Regiment for 6 years. At a time when many shirked their duty, Tom stepped forward with the same quiet strength that would one day define his screen presence. Even in uniform, the dream didn't die. Between rehearsals and performances, he accepted small roles, extra jobs, commercials just enough to keep the flame alive. The man who once wanted to sell real estate was now slowly learning to inhabit characters, clinging to duty and to his dream at the same time. Those years weren't easy. They weren't glamorous, but they forged something unbreakable in Tom Selleck: humility, patience, and unwavering determination. When he returned to civilian life in 1973, he was no longer the same. The boy who had never dreamed of acting was now an artist, with calluses on his hands and discipline in his bones. Hollywood awaited him, but this time, so did he. When Tom Selleck returned from military service in the early 70s, Hollywood didn't roll out the red carpet for him. It barely even noticed him. He was tall, handsome, and polite, 3 things casting directors loved. But he was also unknown, inexperienced, and perhaps worst of all, sincere in a city that often rewarded the opposite. He started, like so many others, from the bottom. Commercials, extra work, one-liners. He sold Pepsi, deodorant, and cigarettes on screen. Not with the star power, but with the quiet confidence of a man willing to work for every second of camera time. But the rejections came as quickly as the paychecks. Over the course of several years, Tom filmed 6 different TV pilots, and none made it to series. He was told no more than yes. The producers saw potential, but not certainty. He wasn't flashy enough. Some said he didn't stand up for himself. He just carried on. And then, in 1979, something changed. Tom landed a recurring role on the Rockford Files, playing a private investigator named Lance White. Audiences took notice. Critics took notice. Hollywood began to pay attention. He wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. He was calm, strong, and quietly magnetic. In a world full of noise, he stood out for his stillness. A year later, everything changed. It was 1980 when Tom Selleck stepped into the role that would define a generation. Thomas Magnum, a charming and shrewd private investigator who lived in a Hawaiian paradise, drove a red Ferrari and sported a mustache that would become iconic. Magnum P.I. was more than just a hit. It was a cultural phenomenon. For 8 seasons, millions tuned in to watch Tom command the screen with a blend of roguish charm and integrity. He didn't just play a detective. He played a man the public could trust, root for, and remember. At the height of the show's success, Tom earned $500,000 per episode, equivalent to about $1.2 million today. But he never let money define him. When the studio refused to give the crew bonuses during the final season, Tom used his own bonus money to pay each crew member $1,000 as a thank you. Quietly, without cameras, without needing credit, because that was just who he was. Magnum P.I. made Tom Selleck a star, but it didn't change the man who had returned from the war to audition for shaving cream commercials. If anything, it reminded the world that success, when earned with patience and principles, lasts longer than fame. Just as the world was beginning to embrace Tom Selleck as a household name, a single decision would haunt him for decades. It was the early 1980s. Magnum P.I. had spread like wildfire, and Tom was no longer just the guy from the commercials. He was an important, strong, principled, magnetic man. And then, as if fate were finally rewarding his patience, a dream opportunity arrived. The lead role in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yes, Tom Selleck was chosen to play Indiana Jones. Not considered, not auditioned, chosen. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas wanted him. His screen tests were nearly perfect. He had the rugged charm, the dry wit, the presence. Everything about him screamed indie, and then Magnum P.I. said no. Tom was under contract. The network wouldn't release him. While he waited, hoping for a schedule change, the studio moved on. The role went to Harrison Ford. The rest is history. It's hard to imagine the weight of that moment, to be so close to cinematic immortality only to see it slip away. Not because you weren't good enough, but because you were already committed to something else, something you loved, something you had built. Tom never spoke bitterly about it. He never blamed anyone, but in hushed interviews, you could hear it. The sadness between the words, the stillness in his eyes, the unspoken "what if?" It's one of those cruel ironies that life sometimes throws our way. At the peak of his career, Tom Selleck had to choose between his word and his future, and he chose integrity. That decision may have cost him global stardom, but it earned him something greater: respect. Even those who barely watched Magnum admired the man who honored his contract even when it hurt. Years later, Tom joked about it. He said, "Harrison did a great job. I probably would have messed it up. But that wasn't humility. That was heartbreak, wearing a smile." The role of Indiana Jones would define an era. But for Tom Selleck, the role he didn't play may have further defined his character. It's painful to think how different his career could have been. How many more films? How much more fame? But perhaps, just perhaps, that loss is part of what makes him who he is. A man who could have had it all, and yet chose to keep his word. After Magnum P.I. ended, Tom Selleck found himself at a crossroads most actors only dream of. Offers poured in. The world wanted more from him, and Hollywood was ready to hand him the keys to the kingdom. But instead of chasing the spotlight, he quietly withdrew. There was no press conference, no drama, no headlines, just silence. And behind that silence was a decision few understood. Tom Selleck chose to step away from the height of his fame to become a father. In 1987, just as Magnum was ending, Tom married Gilly Mack, a vibrant, warm, and devoted British actress. That same year, their daughter Hannah was born. What followed wasn't the release of a new film or another leading role. It was a slow, deliberate disappearance from Hollywood's fast lane. Tom moved his family to a 65-acre ranch in Hidden Valley, California. While the world awaited his next blockbuster, he planted trees, repaired fences, fed horses, and was present for every moment of his daughter's childhood. There was a reason. Shortly after she was born, Hannah developed chronic respiratory problems. At first they were mild, a few persistent colds, a cough that wouldn't go away. But then came the doctors, the specialists, the nights of worry. Tom didn't hesitate. He turned down roles, canceled appearances, and walked away from projects that would have kept him on magazine covers because his daughter needed him and nothing else mattered. "It's not about giving up acting," he once said. "It's about not missing out on the things that truly matter." The man who could have ruled the box office chose instead to quietly rule his own home, sleeves rolled up, far from the red carpets and studio lights. And Gilly stepped back too. After being a rising star, she gave up her career to focus on her family. Together, they became a team built on love, not ambition. Hannah wasn't raised in Beverly Hills, but among horses, dirt roads, and the kind of tranquility Hollywood can't sell. Hannah would become a professional equestrian, pursuing her passion with the same discipline her father had shown on the track, then on screen, and now in caring for his daughter. Very few knew what Tom was giving up during those years. Even fewer knew why. But if you ask him today what his best role has been, he won't say Magnum. He won't say Jesse Stone. He'll simply smile, look at his family, and say, "Dad." Most people believe that Tom Selleck had walked away from Hollywood for good. After all, he had chosen family over fame, solitude over the spotlight. But then, quietly, almost humbly, he returned. Not with a blockbuster, nor with a bold reinvention, but with Frank Reagan, the stoic police commissioner at the heart of CBS's Blue Bloods. When the series premiered in 2010, there were murmurs. Can Tom Selleck still lead a series? It didn't take long to find the answer. Dressed in a tailored suit, with a steady gaze and a voice that commanded respect but never shouted, Tom became the host of a show that wasn't just about crime. It was about legacy, values, and family. Each episode centered around a table, a place where generations of police officers debated justice, mourned losses, and shared a meal. And there, at the head of the table, sat Tom. Not as a gun-toting hero, but as a devoted father. He wasn't chasing youth, he wasn't chasing relevance, he was embodying something much deeper: dignity. Tom was earning around $200,000 an episode, much less than in his Magnum days. But he never complained. And when CBS announced budget cuts for the final season, He and his fellow cast members voluntarily accepted a 25% pay cut to keep the show alive for the fans. He didn't give interviews about it. He didn't need the applause. He just did what had to be done. Some actors returned to Hollywood for attention. Tom returned because he still had something to say and a silent promise to keep. Blue Bloods would last 14 seasons, becoming one of the longest-running police dramas in American television history. Despite everything, Tom remained grounded, poised, and elegant. No car chases, no explosions, no high-octane thrills. Just a man sitting at a table, asking the tough questions, holding the line, showing the world that leadership doesn't always have to be shouting. It didn't make him the most talked-about name in town, but it did make him something far more enduring. A presence, a principle, a promise kept. Amid the flashing lights, studio lots, and millions earned over decades, there has always been one place Tom Selleck has truly called home. A quiet, 65-acre ranch in Hidden Valley, California. No paparazzi, no applause, just open skies, dirt roads, and the healing silence. Tom bought the property in 1988. It once belonged to Dean Martin. But for Tom, it was never about an inheritance. It was about peace. I dug trenches, planted trees, fed horses, and called it my way of staying sane and grounded. It became more than just land. It became a sanctuary. But now that Blue Bloods has ended after 14 seasons, that sanctuary feels uncertain. His net worth may be $45 million, but the cost of maintaining such a large property, thousands of trees, livestock, infrastructure, staff, taxes, is not small. It's a burden that even wealth cannot ignore. In an interview, Tom quietly admitted, "I don't know if I can hold out much longer." One sentence, so simple. But for those who know what the ranch means to him, it lands like a whispered anguish, because this isn't just a ranch. It's where he and Jilly built a life. It's where Hannah learned to ride as a child. It's where laughter echoed through the hills and silence felt sacred, not lonely. On the ranch, Tom isn't a star. He's just a man behind the wheel of a tractor, watching the fog roll in over the trees, checking the fences, feeding the soul he's been nurturing for decades. But time doesn't stop, not even for legends. Approaching 80, Tom's body has changed. A steady income is no longer guaranteed, and the place he spent nearly 40 years protecting now hangs on the brink of uncertainty. He never complains, but when he talks about the ranch, his voice softens. Not because he fears losing a possession, but because he knows that you can buy land, but not memories. If the day comes when Tom must part with this place, it won't just be a financial decision. It will be a silent and painful goodbye to the last piece of a life he built with love, work, and quiet dedication. Tom Selleck has never been the type of man to complain about getting old. He doesn't dwell on lost youth. He doesn't linger on the past. But time marches on without asking permission, and even the strongest must slow down someday. Today, Tom is approaching 80. His silver hair, his slower gait, his quieter presence, everything about him whispers what he rarely says aloud. The same man who once chased criminals at Hawaiian sunsets, rode horses through wild landscapes, and effortlessly carried entire television series now moves through life more deliberately, one step at a time. He still lives on his cherished 65-acre ranch in Hidden Valley, California. Far from the cameras and the noise, it's the same ranch he bought in 1988, the place where he raised his daughter Hannah and built a life with his wife Jilly Mack. And yes, they are still together after more than 3 decades. Their bond, forged long ago in the chaos of Hollywood, now thrives in the simplicity of nature. Every morning, Tom still tries to maintain his old routine. He gets up early, checks on the horses, walks the perimeter, watches the sun spill over the hills, but it gets harder each time. Years of stunts and physical roles have left him with chronic back pain. During the last few seasons of Blue Bloods, he often struggled to stand during long shoots, but he never let it show. Now, without the steady pace of filming, stillness is different. The ranch that once sustained him now silently reminds him of what he can no longer do. Some days he climbs onto his tractor. Other days he simply observes the fields from the porch, his hands folded, remembering when his body moved effortlessly. His daughter Hannah is now 30 years old, a successful equestrian with a life of her own. He still visits her, rides the same trails she used to ride as a child, but he no longer lives on the ranch. And although Jilly is always by his side, Tom feels the distance between what once was and what remains. It's not exactly loneliness, just distance. He still reads every day, still watches westerns, still answers his fans' letters when he can, but the letters don't arrive as often as they used to. And what's worse, the body isn't ready, even if it were. In a recent interview, he paused, shifted in his seat, and said quietly, "I still want to work, but sometimes my body doesn't want to cooperate." It's not the kind of pain you can see. It's not the tragedy of the headlines. It's quieter than that. A moment when you forget why you walked into the room. A hesitation before rising, a sigh that had gone unnoticed before. And for a man like Tom Selleck, so focused, so capable, that silent betrayal of the body can be the hardest loss of all. Because when you can no longer do the things that once defined you, you're left asking yourself a question no one wants to face. Who am I now? The ranch is still his. The love is still there. But the silence has changed. It no longer brings relief. It persists. And Tom, a true gentleman, faces it as he always has, without complaint, without fanfare, only with grace and a quiet sadness that refuses to reveal its name. When people talk about Tom Selleck, they mention Magnum, P.I., Blue Bloods, the red Ferrari, the mustache, and his estimated net worth of $45 million. But for those who truly knew and loved him, his wife, his daughter, his closest friends, what he left behind had nothing to do with money. It was his way of life. It was in his decision to reject Indiana Jones. Not because they didn't love him, but because he had given his word to something else. It was in the years he quietly stepped away from fame to raise a son battling a chronic illness. In the bonus checks he wrote out of his own pocket when a studio refused to pay the crew. In every gesture that never made headlines but touched those around him, these were the things that brought tears to his family's eyes. Not because of the size of the ranch, nor because of the success of the shows, but because of the quiet, unwavering integrity that permeated every chapter of his life. His daughter Hannah has said that growing up on the ranch with her father was the greatest gift she ever received. She didn't grow up with red carpets. She grew up with morning in the saddle, the smell of hay, her father's firm hand on hers. His values, discipline, humility, and resilience weren't taught with words. They were lived by example. His wife, Jilly, who gave up her career to raise a family in peace, has described Tom not as a star, but as a man who never needed to raise his voice to be heard. That kind of presence doesn't fade with age. It deepens, it teaches, it protects. Tom Selleck didn't just entertain millions. He inspired them. Not with ostentation or scandal, but with consistency, with decency. In an industry often driven by ego, he championed grace. In a world that rewards noise, he chose stillness. That in itself is a legacy few can claim. Even now, with less fanfare and more gray hair, people still stop him. Not just to say they loved Magnum or Blue Blood, but to thank him. Thank you for being someone your father admired. Thank you for making them believe that good men still exist. That kindness still matters. That fame doesn't have to come at the expense of character. One day the ranch will no longer be yours. The headlines will fade. The shows will only air in reruns. But your way of life, honest, loyal, and humble, will remain. Because true legacy doesn't live on in what you leave behind. It lives on in who you were while you were here. And if tears fall in the hearts of those he loved, it won't be for what has been lost, but for who he chose to be. Quietly, unwaveringly, always. Tom Selleck's life has never been about seeking attention. It's been about doing the right thing even when no one was watching. From the bright lights of Hollywood to the quiet mornings on his ranch, he lived with integrity, humility, and grace. And that, more than any role or salary, is the legacy he leaves behind. If this story has touched you, even slightly, take a moment to reflect. What part of Tom's journey spoke to you the most? Do you have a memory, a favorite role, or a life lesson that has stayed with you? We'd love to hear about it. Scroll down and share your thoughts in the comments section. If you found this tribute meaningful, please consider supporting the channel. Click like to help others discover this story. Subscribe to Celebsry for more emotional and respectful portraits of the lives behind the legends. And if someone in your life admires quiet strength and dignity, we encourage you to share this video with them. Thank you for spending these few minutes with us.